And we are back. John Carlson, Talk Radio 570 KVI. You've heard by now, of course, about that awful attack on that man in white center by a pack of dogs. Bob Hedges is the man's name, 66 years old, just out for a walk. And a pack of dogs, 3 of them, including a pit bull and a bull mastiff, corner him, knock him down, and maul him. And the guy, who has the presence of mind of a former combat veteran, which is what he is, and also happens to have a pocket knife, manages to save his life that night. The people trying to help him pull the dogs off, but they left him in terrible shape. He's still recovering at the hospital, bites up and down all over his body. And he talked to KOMO 4 about surviving and fighting and what it took.
He says the dogs went feral, one yanking him by the pant leg, the other mauling his face, leaving those brutal scrapes and cuts, and Hedges just kept slashing at them with his knife.
The dog got done with me. He knew he had a fight in his hands. He wasn't just going to have an easy kill, I'll tell you that.
Despite his military training and tour as a Vietnam vet, as he laid there in the streets, he felt he could die.
It's thought across my mind if I didn't get the blood stopped, because I know there was blood everywhere.
But the survivor, the veteran in him, didn't stop.
Back in the war days, that's what they teach us. You have to survive.
The dogs were captured and Hedges was rushed to Harborview. He's starting to heal, and he's keeping perspective. He survived on his instincts and can't blame the dogs for acting on theirs.
You can't be mad about something like that. There's nothing you can do. I mean, I'm not happy about being cut to pieces and bloody mess, but there's not much you can do about it. It's just the way it worked.
The owner of the dogs is cooperating with police and likely will not face charges for blame. King County Animal Control says the dogs were in a locked yard, so this wasn't negligence. Live in the Satellite Center, John Humbert, KOMO 4 News.
Okay. The dog owner is not responsible. Now, here is what the owner of the dogs said to KOMO 4.
The owner of 2 of those dogs says his pets, Envy and Savage, are not violent. He claims the dogs have been locked in the yard and somehow escaped.
Savage, we've had him since he was a baby, and no, all my dogs are family-oriented dogs.
Okay, so he says, hey, these are family-type dogs, and, you know, one of them, Savage, is just really gentleman. We've had him since he was a baby. Okay, so here's my question. You have the 66-year-old Vietnam vet who is terribly mauled by these dogs. You have the government saying, well, the dog owner was in legal possession of the dogs. The dog owner was not negligent. The dog owner complying with legal requirements to keep the dogs locked up. So he won't be facing any charges. So the question I have is, what remedy does Bob Hedges have? And for that, I'm going to turn to my friend Chris Davis. Yes, Chris Davis, the lawyer guy you always hear here on KVI. Chris Davis, what is your take on this? If you were Bob Hedges' attorney, what are his options?
Good morning, John.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. So, there's a difference here between what the city can do as far as whether charge this owner with any type of criminal charge or responsibility, and then there's also a civil claim that Mr. Hedges can bring against the dog owner. So if I were Mr. Hedges' attorney, I certainly would bring a claim against the dog owner for the damages that he sustained from this incident, and there is a specific statute under our laws that permits that without requiring to show that the dog owner was negligent. And I'm not so sure that I agree with the police that this dog owner was not negligent. But in any event, the statute that I'm talking about provides for strict liability.
Okay, wait. I want to get to your criticism of the police or your skepticism on the criminal matter, but let's deal with the civil matter. Again, strict liability, say, doesn't matter if the dog owners were being responsible. They are strictly liable for anything their dogs do, period.
That's correct. As long as the bite or the harm by the dog occurs on public property, and as long as the victim did not provoke the dogs in any way, which is a complete defense under the law, then the dog owner is completely liable for damages that were inflicted upon the victim.
All right, because those dogs, I guess, had gone after some other people before they turned on Mr. Hedges. So, again, it was just a completely random attack. And apparently he did nothing to provoke them. Now, what kind of financial relief can he get? Now, you're laid up in the hospital. I assume all your hospital bills could be paid if you had a legal claim against the dog owner?
Well, certainly. The damages that are available under our laws would include all economic damages, which would also include medical bills, wage or income loss, future medical bills. And then under our laws, they allow what are termed non-economic damages, which are frequently referred to as pain and suffering, disability, disfigurement. Those are subjective losses that, if the case were to go to trial, a jury would have to decide the amount of those damages based on the harms that this gentleman received.
Okay, well, he's got bite marks in his face. He's got all sorts of other visible injuries. So what's his remedy there?
Well, again, that would, we're talking about general damages or non-economic damages, and it would really come down to whoever's deciding the case or trying to settle the case, what the value of those injuries would be. And they would take into account, for instance, permanent scarring, if it's affected him in any way emotionally, perhaps, if he needs, for instance, therapy now or in the future. But because those damages are subjective, there's often disagreement between, for instance, an attorney representing him and the insurance company, if one exists, or a jury, in fact.
Okay, so number 1, medical bills. Number 2, loss of wages. Number 3, pain and suffering. Number 4, rehab. All those are revenue streams that could be opened up as a result of this if he filed a civil claim.
That's correct. Now, I want to say, though, that even though he has those damages and the right to pursue those damages, a completely different question is whether the dog owner has the means or insurance to pay those damages. So oftentimes, in my position as a lawyer, when a dog owner doesn't have the right insurance, and typically a homeowner's policy might cover this, then there's really not a lot the victim can do.
Okay. The last question on the civil front, what about just money for the trauma of the experience itself?
Yes, that is clearly compensable.
Okay. Under what category?
That would be considered non-economic loss.
Very good. So, again, Chris Davis, the attorney, is my guest here. We're talking about what this Vietnam vet's options are after these 3 dogs attacked him. And the authorities say, well, the dog owner is not negligent because he was doing what the law requires him to do to keep these dogs penned in. They just happened to escape. You say you're not sure you would cut that same break on the criminal front to the dog owner.
That's right. I mean, there certainly needs more investigation, and I need to know more facts. So earlier, I just thought you mentioned that this had happened before with these dogs. It happened before that same night. The dogs got out and went after other people. Okay, but then they trained their attention on Mr. Hedges. So then I would certainly want to know about the prior history of the dogs and what the owner knew. So oftentimes when we get cases like this, we will comb the neighborhood and talk to neighbors who might have had contact with the dogs. Sometimes there might be records, prior records with animal control about prior incidences of the dogs biting either other dogs or humans. The point being, if this was not the first incident that would put the owner on notice that his dogs are potentially dangerous or are dangerous, then it comes down to what did he do enough to make sure that these dogs could not escape? Another question would be, how often did the dogs escape? Was this really a tight enclosure, or was this something the owner knew that the dogs often got out on?
So it sounds like, Chris, what you're saying is the authorities appear to have jumped to a conclusion that merits much more investigation before they make that call.
If those things were not, that type of investigation was not done, I would say yes, they have jumped to that conclusion with perhaps not doing enough.
All right, very good. Chris Davis, good having you here. I appreciate you going over the legal issues involved.
Anytime, John.
You got it. Again, that's lawyer Chris Davis we call on from time to time to just get his take on what options are there for Mr. Hedges and whether or not there could be some criminal liability for the dog owner if it turns out that these dogs had gotten out before, or if it turns out that these dogs have a history of attacking people.